bank, that reconciliation isn't really done until the end of the year. So there was $18,000 in revenue, I'm told, that was sitting there in April and May that we were unaware of until a reconciliation was done at the end of the year. To me, in a business this size, reconciliations of that type would probably be done more frequently than at the end of the season, and so that's sort of an obvious recommendation, is that we put a process in place to have more regular reconciliations against what's in the bank, so that we know we're capturing all of our revenue properly in the period that it's been earned. On the expense side, with respect to salaries, was a place where there really was a big difference, again, from the full year projection to what that we had at September to what we wound up with at the end of the year. And that's really because of the way payroll works. There's a lag between the cutoff for payroll and when it shows up on the financials. So actually at September 30th, when we saw the actual, it was only through September 18th, and there were people working at the park for the rest of the month of September, quite a bit, as I can see, and that wasn't captured. And also, there was no projection made for October and November to close down the park. So they sort of cut it off at September 18th, said, we'll throw in a little bit more money to get to the end of the year, but not really a good estimate of what it might take, not any estimate for any allocations of salary from Rye Town, which I understand, for example, some of the grounds people are allocated salaries over. No estimate of that was made. So by the time you got to December, compared to what had been projected at September 30th, the salary expense had gone up by 13% for the grounds people, 10% for the security guards, and 7.5% for the cashiers from what we had thought it would be. So, that's surprising. And I think that taking a look at, and we talked about this, just looking at maybe some estimates. First of all, what your payroll is for the 18th through October 3rd, which is your last pay period. You can estimate that pretty well. And then really have just a better projection of what it's going to take to close down the park for the year, so that you know a better idea in September of what your full year projections might be for the year. Another area that was a surprise was in the area of unemployment insurance. We finished the year at $53,000 roughly for unemployment insurance expense. At September 30th, the financial statement projections reflected that it was going to be $26,000. So we finished the year double what we thought it was going to be in September. The experience in 2010 with respect to unemployment insurance claims was very different than it was in 2009. So maybe you can't project that. But I guess what that raises is, and we've talked about this, there are ways that, if you change the way that you pay into unemployment insurance. Right now, Rye Town Park is self-insured for unemployment insurance. And maybe we should look at paying into the unemployment insurance fund, and then at least you're capped, right? Your expense is what it is. You've paid in, and you actually have insurance for your unemployment claims. And otherwise, is there some way to change the hiring practices at the park to make it so that these are very clearly seasonal workers and not workers who are entitled to uninsurance claims? So those are sort of more procedural, operational changes than financial statement changes. Because again, I don't know that you could have predicted that you'd have such a different experience this year. One very Sure. Sorry.
Legally, I don't know, Mr. Noto. Can we ask people not to file unemployment insurance? Can we make that a condition of hire?
No.
I didn't think so.
But I don't know if they have to work for a certain period of time
Right.
before they're eligible,
Right.
if there are ways
Structure and stagger how
to
they
do
work,
that.
so they don't fall.
Yeah.
Right.
that would be more of the suggestion.
Because the total expense was, what, $70,000 for the year?
No.
I think it was 53.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Which, in $1 million budget,
Well, that's huge.
No, it's a very big number.
Yeah.
Okay, interest expense, that was another area where there was really a very significant variance in the full year projection. At September 30th, the full year projection for interest expense was $10,000, and we wound up the year at $54,000. So that's obviously a very big difference. And I think I think what happened, just to give people an idea of where this interest expense comes from, throughout the year, the town of Rye is funding working capital for the park. And, before you're generating revenue, Rye Town is funding the working capital and, basically build up a daily balance that is owed from Rye Town Park, part of which the city of Rye is responsible for, obviously. Throughout the year, that builds up, and it's charged interest at a rate of 5%. And that 5% is an historical rate. I don't know where it came from, I don't have the documents, but it's an historical rate of 5%. In 2010, what was different was there was the roof repair project. So you have this very large capital expenditure project, over $1 million, and as you are paying those construction draws, the money is accruing this balance at a rate of 5%. So that's really what threw it off from last year, basically. And at September 30th, the estimate was made for interest expense, but it doesn't appear that it was taken into account that we had this very large capital expenditure for the year. I think that, and then the interest balance was actually only calculated at year end. It's not calculated on a monthly basis or estimated on a monthly basis. So obviously a recommendation is that the running balance of the outstanding amount be calculated on a more frequent basis, put on the financial statements on a more frequent basis, and the updates done monthly. And also use a published market rate instead of 5%, a rate that all the municipalities can agree on is their borrowing rate, is a rate they could be charged. And additionally, and I don't know if this is something the City of Rye wants to do, but they could be given the opportunity to pay down the loan on a more frequent basis and not carry that outstanding balance. And
Right, 'cause we pay as we get billed, right?
you pay as you get billed, but, well, my understanding is that you might not get billed, for example, for the annual deficit until the audited financial
Right.
statements are done.
Right.
But if you wanted to, you could get billed on a quarterly basis based on an estimate, and then true up at the end of the year when the auditeds are done. The roof repair project, you could have funded a pro rata share of the construction draws if you, but,
Yeah, because we did pay almost $400,000 in May or June, right?
okay, that I don't know.
Yeah, so I think that's something we should look at a policy that we would pay quarterly.
Well, that's just sort of a related question, Paula and Mayor French, because I've always amazed at how much of government is inertia, right? That's the way we did it, and so like the 5%, I agree with you, it's historical, and I don't quite know why that was the number. And I guess similarly, I mean, again, Town Attorney Noto, I don't know if it's written anywhere where Rye Town is in the obligation to finance the park. I would have thought, again, that's sort of a matter of past practice. And, if the commission decides we want to simply borrow the money, or, I think that's another thing we should probably look at in terms of who advances the money to the park and how.
And we could look at,
The commission can't advance money because the commission has no money.
Right.
Each of you is a municipality, and that's why the town of Rye and the city of Rye split the deficit, because that's how it's been, that's in the law as far as how we divide up the deficit. But the commission has no borrowing authority as a commission. So each individual municipality would have to borrow the money. And
So maybe the way
The
to,
town of Rye is always
Right.
the park through its payroll and everything else, and that's the way.
well, maybe, yeah, so it's, I guess, I guess it sounds like it's a matter of agreeing with the city of Rye. In other words, you could presumably finance 48% of the park, right? Because you're going to be on the hook at the end and you wouldn't have any interest expense.
Right.
So, we could do it that way too.
Yep, I think so.
okay. So I've just tried to give you a few examples,
Sure.
and we're talking about, again, financial statement presentation and just the ability to use these projections and avoid the kind of surprise that we saw this year. I think, a couple other things. I know we're going to talk about automation, and automation I was able to, as a representative of the Rye City Finance Committee, was able to get involved in looking at this automation process. And one thing that automation will do for parking and for beach collection, obviously you have the benefit of reducing headcount, but you also have the added benefit of facilitating reporting. You'll have more accurate and timely reporting. You're going to have better data that can help you do better scheduling of labor. You'll have better data on usage. And it also provides a very important control element that's currently missing in the system. You do daily reconciliations between the number and the type of transactions that are recorded in the system, but there's no reconciliation between, how many cars are driving in there and how many get entered into the system. So that kind of reconciliation, which would be fairly common for a business this size, is missing in this system because we don't have automation. And I think that, again, I was involved with the advisory board that is looking at this RFP, and my focus is really on what are the control elements that automation can bring us. I know we're going to talk about the 2011 budget. I really didn't have the opportunity to dig too much into that, so I don't know if maybe we just wait for your comments on the 2011 budget.
Yeah, I think, talking to Mayor French earlier tonight, I think what we're, rather than review and approve the budget, I think what we're going to look to do tonight is review it. I think what we talked about is maybe, since both of us share a concern that we had a wonderfully sunny summer last year, it seems likely that we'll have more rain days, and therefore our revenue projection may be subject to some shortfall. That we talked about possibly creating a cost containment committee, where basically we'd sit down with the staff and really scrub the numbers, look at them real hard and see what we can reduce, and then approve the budget. Hopefully, with cost containment committee recommendations for next month.
Okay. I mean, I'd be happy to be involved any.
That would be wonderful. Actually, Mayor French volunteered you beforehand, so that's wonderful that you're.
We could have
Thanks
staff,
so much.
citizens, and commission members if we want. Right. Good. Excellent.
Okay.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking time,
Thank
Paula,
you all.
to help us out. Thank you. Wonderful. Mayor French, do you and Mr. Sack, Commissioner Sack, want to?
Yeah, Joe, I'll tee it
yeah,
up,
please.
and then if you want to add anything.
Please.
So, yeah, just to follow up to...
Actually, sorry, I just want to make one comment. First of all, Paula, thank you so much for taking the time and effort to do this. I think we made a lot of progress last year with the parking committee and their hard work and involvement. So I'm really looking forward to the Rye Citizen Finance Committee doing the same kind of thing. So I really appreciate you taking the time and effort to do that and the analysis.
And I certainly appreciate the time that Mr. Novotny and Mr. Lindsay spent with me.
Thank you.
Get up to speed. I look forward to working with them.
Terrific. Well, let me actually take that up. Follow up. Also, thank Mr. Nowotny and Mr. Transi for the time. I know Rye City in this difficult financial environment is really taking a hard look at finances, and so I think we're looking to be 2,000% transparent. I know Mr. Transi and Mr. Nowotny have spent a lot of time with both the Rye Citizens Finance Committee and your staff at Rye City. So, I wanted to thank you for that. I think the other thing, I think the part of the reason that we've missed every year between September and December, and I think that recommendation for monthly estimates is a terrific one, and I'm really hopeful and confident that we won't have the miss again this year. Once you identify a mistake, it's easier to rectify. So I'm very hopeful and confident that we won't have the same kind of mistake. I think part of the reason the mistake was so outsized this year was because of the construction costs, so obviously, which was new, so the interest expense was done differently. We also, as part of the effort to make sure we were more secure this year, responding to all the requests from the community, we did increase staffing. And so I think that our estimates for unemployment insurance as a result were also impacted. Now we're working very aggressively to reduce that, and we'll think about some of the staggered hiring we talked about to reduce that as unemployment costs. But I think the formation of the cost committee will do that. But I think there was a couple of sort of unusual circumstances that contributed to the magnitude of the surprise this year as well.
Mr. Supervisor?
Please. Yep.
We got a couple of pleasant surprises.
Do you want to?
I was glad that we did meet with Paula. She was great, and all the recommendations she came up with are going to be applied. We are in the throes of finalizing the audit, and there were a couple of good surprises that came out of it, okay? One was after recalculating the interest expense, because there was a couple of grant payments that came in, but they came into the town of Rye. So when I did my initial interest expense, I didn't give credit to the Rye Town Park Commission for that amount. So I think the interest expense is going to go down to about $35,000. The other thing is there was a posting. There was an item that was paid outside of L&M Roofing, which was to Associated Lighting, and that was for Bishop the lightning rods on the.
Lightning rods,
Okay.
if you remember, that was a change order.
It was $15,000.
Right.
Both that item got split into repairs, equipment repairs and maintenance, and grounds repairs and maintenance. So that is a $15,000 reduction. So there are going to be some changes that are going to be affected by the year-end audit that are going to be positive. So the projections that were made of $140,000 they were heavy, and based on the conversations we had with Paula as it relates to posting the interest expense on a monthly basis, reconciling the sales on a monthly basis as it relates to deposits, and basically me and Bishop are going to go through the payroll probably on a real-time basis, where next year we're not going to be projecting numbers in September, but we're going to really have a better handle on it. And it's partially my fault, because over the years we've done this. This is the way we've done things for years. We've always come through with the numbers at the end of the year. And since we've taken over in the last 3 years, our deficits have been around $100,000 consistently. So we recognize some of the shortfalls that came about this year based on the due diligence that you guys have put into this. And I can assure you that we're not going to have these problems next year. So that's basically where we're coming from on that.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ternsey. And again, thank you for all your hard work. And I do, again, I have to say, I'm loving the citizen participation, because it only makes us better. I mean, so thank you for making us look good. And I think there's a commitment here from the staff and certainly from Rye Town that we'll get it right this year.
Yeah, so I was great news, Sam. That's, and Paula, keep digging. Maybe if we dig a little more. But we realized early on that there's so much expertise in the community that how do we tap into it? We saw it with our parking committee last year. We've seen it all across our communities. We've got our roles to play, but the citizens have to have a voice. And excellent work. David Mullane, the chair, also is involved. And so a lot of our recommendations that Commissioner Sack and I put together reflect back to some of Paul's comments. One is as simple as a calendar. We approved the budget in the city of Rye, December 15th. If we're getting numbers after the fact from Rye Town Park, that's going to affect what we've already approved. And so as a result, this year, in the city of Rye, we have to come up with an additional $44,000 that we didn't budget because those costs were reflected after the fact. Except now that may be lower, so that's good news. The budget practices and management all ties back to reconciliation with some of, 941s that are called, the payroll receipts?
Yep.
Had we known in October and November, December, on payroll that was paid out in September, that would have, helped us as we did our budget in December in the city of Rye. So part of that is just the reconciliation process and how things are reported monthly. Approvals. Generally how we do things in our governments is anything that's going to be spent or an expense that's going to be paid out that's over budget has to get approval from the governing body.
Sure.
So I would recommend that we make sure we do that. Wages, for example, were, I think, $75,000 over budget, which was a surprise. And not saying that it wasn't legitimate at all or that we didn't hire those staff, but anything that goes above a line item needs approval by the body. Capital investment is another thing. I think we've all come to realize the amount of capital investment that's needed in our infrastructure is not going to be paid out of operating budgets. And even if we set a line item of $50,000, we're talking about hundreds of thousands and into the millions of dollars. That has to be a governing decision between the two bodies, Rye Town and the City of Rye, to put together a joint capital plan and really plan out how we're going to fund these things over time, because it will require bonding at some point in time. If it's important to the community to invest in the park.
Well, I think that, and I know Mayor Feinstein's had a question here about a capital reserve as well, and I think we need to really address this issue.
Yep.
And we've talked about this, right, Commissioner Sanicho?
Many times.
What, did we set up a group to do that, or what do we?
Well, I know Lisa Easton, actually, I don't want to, you want to talk about that specifically later, or do you want to, I don't want to interrupt the mayor's
Well,
presentation?
Yeah, sure.
Well, we're in capital, we can delve on. I mean, one of the things we do is a private, public partnership where it's a matching capital program, where the citizens privately raise money, the government commits to matching it, and that we can get Rye Town, Rye City, the public, and then through our operating budget, have another line item. So between those four sources, you could get, start to get the basis of some kind of operating, or capital plan.
But what we've done on the capital, what we have is, we've gone into the park and we met with Lisa Easton, who's our architect. She developed a plan. When I say a plan, she developed a needs assessment based upon conditions throughout the park, be it both infrastructure and structural components that need attention, present, near future, foreseeable future, and then long-range planning. I think Lisa gave a presentation a few years back with some rough cost to it, and it just begs the fact that we need to have a capital plan. There's real money that needs to be invested into the park. There's no doubt that things are falling apart and things need improvement. Just the roof alone was an expensive project, but now we have to get into that. So Commissioner Carbon, that the whole thing there was that we started the process. I think the recognition is there by everybody on the commission. It's just a matter of the fundamental, how do we get to the next step?
Well, exactly. Because I think, I don't know if it's a wish list or a needs assessment of about $14 million, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was a big number.
I think it scared us a bit when we first saw it, and maybe we shied away, but I don't think we can do that. I think we absolutely have to come up with a plan to meet the expenditures. We put the roof up, and we can't just leave that building there, as is forever. And I guess, of course, this is a good time to build with, they work, certainly labor costs are down.
But there's also to recognize the fact that we didn't do this walkthrough and needs assessment, in a vacuum. We had staff. As a matter of fact, then who's your predecessor?
Steve Otis.
Mayor Otis.
Mayor Otis, and also the city engineer. We were all together as a group. Because we went out there at least twice that I could recall.
With
Frank,
George,
I think.
too?
Yeah, George was out there. So there's some, we got the meat and potatoes of what needs to happen out there. But there's a true cost that needs to be considered.
Well, let me ask you this, Mayor French. Do you have a capital plan for the city of Rye?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. This, to me, is more of a government decision where we all have infrastructure staff. That we have engineers, a city planner, city manager. I don't know if Rye Town has an infrastructure staff or a footprint.
No.
So this is why I think it would be Rybrook, Portchester, and Rye, City of Rye, really to, at a staff level, put together a needs assessment and how we best fund that, or plan for it through a capital plan.
Yeah, in Rybrook, we have a capital plan. It's a projection. In fact, we just presented that at our last board meeting as well, as far as capital projects. And the discussion that we've always taken place is how do we fund capital projects? It's a little bit different in Rybrook. It's not a good thing to, obviously, to fund capital projects out of your operating budget. Either you do it out of surplus or you have to go bonding because, let's face it, if you're off on your operating budget, it's very difficult, and you don't want to cut back on your capital projects.
Right.
But it is very important.
Is it a specific amount? Do you have like a 10?
What we have is, and we did this actually at our last board meeting. It was looking at some of the needs going forward for a 6-year plan, and it's not, we didn't adopt it, but it's just an overview of where we are. And then on the side were some very larger projects that would require a significant amount of bonding. But there are capital projects. In a village of Rybrook, for example, can be cars, for example. Well, of course, the biggest one is road resurfacing. That's a capital project.
Right.
And that's a big ongoing one. So you really have to look at it and then make a determination. You may want to even, forget about bonding, but on an ongoing basis, have a capital fund to put into, and I'm just going to use an example for those in the room. The library, for example. Until we entered into an intermunicipal agreement between Rybrook and Portchester, there was no capital fund. Now, at least, we're funding it. Next year will be $35,000 each municipality. That's $70,000. Now, and it goes up. It's just the fact that that's a smaller amount based. But what you're doing is getting some certainty that there's going to be money there.
Right.
And so these are the things that, I know that we've talked about this for a while, and I'm very pleased that we're really going to make this year, 2011,
Yeah.
a determining year that we finalize these issues,
Yeah.
whether it be better reporting as far as expenditures of the park on a monthly basis. I know I've discussed that.
Yep.
And I'm sure we'll get to, I see, you have more to
Did you
discuss.
say-
about,
did you want to say-
shared
In
services.
Portchester, what they've done in Portchester, what we've done is, because we have such a debt burden, we have over $37 million worth of debt
Wow.
on a budget that's only $34 million. So what we did this year is we went on a ban, and we decided that we were going to take $2 million ban out, and we were going to fund that $500,000 over the next 4 years. So instead of setting up a reserve, Joan, we set up, we
You can
started
do that.
reverse.
Well, interest rates are low
Right.
also. I mean, that's something else we grapple with. Interest rates are so low that you can go to borrow. Obviously, you have to pay
We
it
got it
back.
for
at
less
some point.
than a half a percent.
And we've done that. I mean, Rybrook, our debt is $6 million on an operating budget of about $17 million.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we've had that same conversation, should you go out and bond?
The problem you have here is you don't have an entity that can borrow
That is
on its
correct.
own.
That's
You
really-
have to deal with the city of Rye, and you have
Right.
to deal with, really, Portchester and Rybrook. Well,
Town
no,
of
it's the
Rye.
town of Rye, the town of
It's
Rye.
the town of Rye.
So that's the problem you
Yeah.
have. But bans are very effective now, and the rates are really good.
Well, but isn't this something that the town of Rye and this city would be entering into an intermunicipal agreement, really, when you think about it, as far as this funding, and really a capital plan? And it would be the way I look at an IMA?
That's what it should be. Right
Well,
now,
yeah.
we get told that we got to come up with the
No,
money.
but it
so we
really
can-
should be, and the reason I'm using an example, which is not really the same related to the library, but really, it gave us a lot more certainty, and we entered into that before the downturn, but I think that really helps. So therefore, if something happens in the future, there's certainty.
Right.
So,
Do you have a 5-year operating budget in Rybrook, Joan? Do you guys do an operating budget for 5 years also?
no, no,
Just capital.
just capital.
Well, Sam, one of the other things that we're faced with such an old park and not ever having a capital reserve is that the fresh look that we're having is really 50 years late.
Yeah, right.
So the catch-up work is very expensive. So
Right.
we're looking at fund balance in this budget, or we thought last year when we created the budget, we'd have fund balance that we can start creating a capital reserve.
But the mayor brings up a good point.
Right.
She's only got $6 million worth of debt in
Sure.
the village of Rybrook. We're talking about equally going into the hole for $5
yeah.
million apiece, when she's running a complete village for $5 million
Yeah,
in debt.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a cost, it depends on what you want to do.
Excellent, yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Conundrum.
but in terms of then taking this forward, perhaps, which we have the needs assessment, that's been done.
Yep.
So the question really is, how do we jointly come up with a proposal to fund that? And actually, the other related topic was, we were talking about trying to do a public-private partnership, as we talked about, maybe an RFP. I know the Children's Museum is going back and forth with the county. I guess that's related as well. But, if it didn't happen with the county, I mean, obviously that would, we'd hope that they might give us a look. So I guess the related issue is the joint capital plan, and then eventually see if, we might be able to do an RFP. Obviously, the RFP for Playland is going to be vetted. So I guess what I'd like to suggest, Mayor French, is that your staff and our staff come up with well, we have the needs assessment,
Right.
a possible funding plan, maybe perhaps Mr. Trenzi and Mr. Watney can get together with your staff.
Yep.
Come up with a funding plan, we can review that, and then basically, once the Playland RFP, I guess that should be awarded by the summer sometime, wouldn't it?
I think by November.
November, okay.
Yeah, we're going to go through, until July 4th, a feasibility analysis.
Okay.
Then the county's going to look at legal and operational aspects to it, so probably around Thanksgiving, they'll make an award of some kind, or award to start to negotiate
Right.
from that point.
Well, so we should be, so let's get let's look at the needs assessment. Let's put some numbers around that. What would if we wanted to bond this, what would the cost be? How would it amortize? How many years would it take place? Because I agree with Commissioner Salonico, we really put it off for